Right, so for this next one, I'm basically going to use this chocobo as an example. This is a large image now. This is one that wouldn't just be able to strip the bitmap and create a duplicate of it. I've tried that already and it came out at 1.5 meg, so it's not going to work at all for what we need it to. It's not a problem though, because this is where the other method I've mentioned comes in. This is the more long-winded method, but it allows you to create much more intricate objects and graphics if you're willing to put the time into it. So first of all, I'm going to get rid of our chocobo here, because that's the SVG that we know doesn't work. It's absolutely no point keeping it. Although, if anyone's curious, if I click on the points tool again, as you can see, there is a lot of points in that image. And you might be, again, there's subsections, there's different areas here. As you can see, there are a load of points that are increasing the size of it. And it's never going to work as how we want it to. So, let's get rid of him. And I'm going to re-import him. This is the original bitmap image. And I'm just going to plop him in the middle of the page. Do be aware, the bigger the image, the slower Inkscape tends to run. I try and keep to small images. And I will try and resize him to see if that helps at all. There we go. Seems a bit better. But again, because he's made up of so many components, the system's going to struggle with him. So, what we want to do now is trace this, but we want to trace it ourselves rather than relying on the system to do so. So to do that, down the side here, you'll see a Bezier Curves and Straight Line tool. Click on that one, pick a point on your picture, in this case we go with his nose, and click. The system will then draw a line to your mouse cursor. Now, for the time being, we only want rough curves of this. We're not going to do a perfect sketch, and we only want the outside edges, and you'll see why in a minute. So I'm trying to keep down as close as possible, but without worrying about extreme accuracy or curvature or things like that, because we can come back and we can fix that in a minute. The idea is we just want to create our rough outline to start with. As I said, we want to focus on the outside lines because that's what we're going to use to build off of. I will admit, this is not the most interesting thing you can probably watch on YouTube at this point in time. Oh, look at that man, he's clicking on points. I have put some music on in the background. It's the Persona 5 soundtrack, by the way, in case I was wondering. That game I very recently finished after 90 hours. Good game, though. Right, up we go, round the back. As I said, I'm not worried too much about any kind of real accuracy at the moment. You saw how many points were in this thing initially. We just need to make sure that we're staying in a sensible level of points. Round we go. Yeah, do you know what, I'll include that effect. Background like that. What it becomes at this point is a game of almost like colour matching, I say blocks really. Basically, you try and create a fill shape of the colour you want, and then you just kind of tweak the edges of it to fit where it needs to. But you could create one giant shape or lots of little shapes, whichever one uses the least amount of index points you create. So I'm going to go up the back of his head. I'm not going to worry about a little bit there. It's easy enough to add extra points should you need to later on in the graphic anyway. It's just getting the initial setup sorted. I will say now, the plan is not to try and do this whole graphic over a recording. It's just to give you the foundations to build the what you need to do. I may look at recording a session and speeding it up significantly so people can watch it then, but for now I'll just settle for going over the basics. Right, so there we go. So there's our chocobo. So if we click and drag that, as you can see, we've got a mask of our chocobo friend there. Now, what I'm actually going to do is, similar to the last video, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call it Outline. I'm going to create it below the current, Add. I'm then going to select our outline. I'm then going to move to Layer, Outline, Move. I'm then going to select our core chocobo. I'm going to keep changing how I pronounce that just to wind people up. And I'm going to change the opacity. So down here there's a little opacity slider. I'm going to change that to, let's say, 40% opacity. There we go. And then I'm going to lock the layer. So I can't touch the core chocobo on the top layer now. Absolutely fine. So depending on how you work, there could be a few ways of doing this. The way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to adjust these lines so that they fit in properly. So first thing, these ones are the solid joins. We can deal with those. So hold Control and click on a node, and it'll turn it into this curvature with handles on it. So you can basically fiddle around with it and make it fit. This is why I said don't worry about accuracy to start with, because we're going to come back and do this anyway. And as I'm doing so, it's like this one here, I can probably get rid of that actually now, because I can curve that round like so. That one there, yeah, that can also go, and we'll curve. So basically, once I've done that, what I would work through then is go around and curve all of those so they match our outside lines, so that we've got that, our outsides are then fit in place and we're all good. Now the next one we want to do is we actually want some fill colour. So I'm going to switch to layer 1, grab my pen and click on our chocobo, and go back to layer outline. And I'm going to fill in. Oh, that's not going to work, is it? What have I done wrong there? I've missed a step. Ah, that was it. So what I actually want to do is, because I want to fill the chocobo. In fact, I've just seen a better way of doing this. Because the whole chocobo is technically yellow, we could take our outline, and rather than neatening up the outline, we could fill in the outline directly and adjust it at the same time. So I'm going to take the outline out. I'm going to right click on it. He says, I'm going to right click on it and go fill and stroke. Pop up this side menu here. So I want to fill it. Now it's defaulted using black, which I don't want to do. So I'm going to use the dropper tool and click on our chocobo. And why is that the wrong color? Of course it's the wrong color because I'm using the opacity one. One thing to bear in mind, if you fade an item out and then you try and pick colors from it, it will take the opacity into account in your new picked color. So what I can actually do is slide that all the way up there and fix that. I'm just going to move it far further over. So now we have our chocobo. Chocobo. I'm going to keep doing that. Loki's going to kill me. So if I paste the original image in, we've almost got a similar color scheme there. And in fact, what we could do is use the original image as a reference. So I could go back here and pick that darker yellow or that lighter yellow, whichever one I feel is necessary. I don't see the point of keeping the big image around. And again, this is where some of the other parts will come into play, where we go about creating subsections and things like that. So give me the yellow and then set the opacity to full, we're fine. So at this point, we could also change the outside. So if I click on stroke paint, we can tell it's a full color black stroke. I can change this as well in a similar method by selecting that, clicking on him, and then just whacking the opacity right the way up. And you can also change the stroke style. So as you can see, this is quite a thick line around the outside here. I could actually change that here by saying, well, I want this to be 0.5. Nice and thick. And this is a quite handy one as well, is you can change the join type. So curved joins, curved ends, bevel joins, or like straight up meter joins by the looks of it. Now you may not notice much, and again, this is where you would go around and curve it properly. Again, for the brevity of this video, I'm not going to go around and do the entire thing. So we're happy with that. So there's our chocobo. We've got our chocobo down. We've got our outline. We've got our background color. But we're still missing several bits. So we'd have to do the same for the nose. So if we bring that back in, line it back up. And again, this is where layers are your best friend. We're going to add a layer, and I'm going to call it nose. And we're on nose. Now, to avoid accidentally moving the outline, I'm going to lock outline as well. So nose sits on top of outline and background. And then we want our pen again. Where have you gone? There. So again, similar thing. draw out around his snot. There are going to be points where you're going to have some overlap with existing outlines and that. There is a way of joining some outlines onto another, but you've got to bear in mind that if you're using a thick outline like we are for the outside here, and I then try to extend it, I'd end up with a thick outline all around his nose as well, which I want to avoid. That's why I've done 2 separate joins there. So, switch back to the mouse tool, I drag his nose out the way, or his beak I should say, it's not his nose. Again, I'm going to just switch those back to rounded. Again, I'm not going to worry about going around and rounding it all off for the time being because I'm just doing this to demo it. So stroke paint, we do want that one there, and it should automatically, ooh, that was unexpected. Okay, so this may be a case where you might find it actually better to have an original copy of the image that you can right click on and pull the bits off of if you want to. And we want nose. Alright, let's use the black line then. So black line, and then fill, paint colours, and then dark. Slide it back on his face. Now, just to show you how far along we are, I'm going to hide that. So, as you can see, again, it doesn't look pretty because I haven't gone around and tidied the edges up or all that, but you can see the effect we're going for. It's a flat shaded version of this, and we're just getting the right bits and pieces in place. What I would recommend doing is to see how far along you are every so often is, if you don't have the original image in the same program, then save your image, see how far along you are, go back to it. If you do have the original image, like I do, what I tend to do is come in, I will delete that, I will then do File, Save, then I hit Ctrl-Z to recreate it. And we can go and have a look at our chocobo, where is it there, as you 5.18 without its base image in place. So basically that's all it is, it's creating the shapes, doing them, tracing them manually, creating the shapes, putting them in, removing the path, using the path edit tool up here, removing those bits where you don't need them, and working around them as best you can with the tools you've got to hand. Use layers to separate it all out so that you know, like if the entire base level is going to be that same yellow, so that's our background, that goes right at the bottom. We could, once we've gotten to a point where we've got them detailed up, we've got all these little feather effects and things like that in here, have a look at what it would take to bring him up to, let me just bring the parent up again. Oh, I've blocked the layer, haven't I? 100. So you could start looking at these darker areas here. So let's say we wanted to create an area based on that. I'll get my pen out. Now, again, don't worry about being 100% accurate with this. I just want to create the shadowing effect, and you'll see there's a bit of a cheat with this in a minute. What I would recommend though is before you start playing around with shadowing is make sure that you've acquired or you've reached the right size that you need it to be and the right file size. There's no point going through all the effort of adding extra shadowing that if you're already near that 15k limit. Unless you can do it really, really cleverly, you'll probably find you'll push the limit with some more advanced shadowing. But stuff like this, you might be okay with this. And again, some of these vectors I'm going to get rid of once I curve this all out, which again I'm not going to do for this demo. So, we know this is our shape. I'm going to drag it out. I'm going to send it to the nose layer, just because it's there out of the way then. Move to layer, nose, move. The reason it's hidden, by the way, is that the raw image has a white background, whereas the vector we're building doesn't, it's transparent. So one thing I want to do now is make sure that this is the right colour. So I'm going to set the stroke paint to this one and the fill colour to this yellow as well. So as you can see there, it just looks like a dark yellow curve. So if we go back to our main layer, hide layer. Actually, I don't want to hide the layer, I want to make him, what did we say earlier, 40%? Yeah, 40%. I like keeping the layer there, but faded out so that I can use it as a reference. you might work differently. You might be quite happy having a separate image that you use as your baseline. I'm not very arty, so tracing is my easy way through it. So on the nose layer, I select our shadowing and I bring it in here. If you find it's trying to jump around and snap, if you hit the % key, so Shift 5, it should disable that. Oh, I forgot to lock the layer. That was very clever. Got layer 1, lock layer, thank you. So again, it looks really unfinished. In fact, you know, let's hide layer 1 so you can see it. So it looks a bit bleh when you look at it. It's like, yeah, I don't like the look of that. And that's where we get a little bit more creative with our stroke type, and we set a blur on it. So in the fill, blur, let's say 10%. Oh, that's 100, too many digits, 10. It might be a little bit too weak, so let's go with a 5. So yeah, so we're getting that shadowing effect in there then, and it's just being a little bit creative with the blur effects and things like that. So you can still create the shadowing effect, and you just need to be really careful with how you do it. Try and keep your points to a minimum, and just keep it as simple as possible. Try and use curves where you can. Try and remove any, unless you've got ins and outs like this bit here at the back. That's always going to be a bit tricky, because outline, unlock. Because of the way it's built, that's always going to be a bit tricky. Now you can, I'll tell you what, let's convert these to curves and I'll show you some of the options. So you can make really tight curves. And if you hold control, you'll cycle through different types as well. Which one is this? There you go. The diamond shape node allows you to adjust the curves separately, so you could do that. And then this one here, diamond, come on, click diamond, there we go. So being a little bit creative, you could come up with some solutions to that. And again, we could possibly remove this guy down here entirely and overlap those two. So as you can see there, the strength of the curve has created our indent itself. So we've gotten rid of a node just by doing that. That one there and that one there can go, and we can adjust the curve. This one will become a curve on its own. So yeah, there's a million ways of making it work. It's just, it'll take time to do so. I must admit, I spent far longer than I care to admit making a Pinkie Pie one last night, only to sort of sit down and realise this morning that actually there are easier ways of doing it by doing this. So I took that, broke it down into its core components, and then tried to remove the nodes from it, and of course it just ended up looking terrible. Whereas if you take your image, trace it yourself, and then go around and just tweak and just remove the nodes that you don't need, add the bits you do, save it often, test it often, make sure you're not exceeding the size by any obscene amount, and then go from there. Now, one other thing that I will mention quickly is, let me get rid of the main image again, so delete. Oh, I got rid of the wrong one then. Because layer 1's still locked. Delete. Save. Now, at the moment, I've been doing Control S, which just saves normally as an SVG file. So, where is it there? We're doing fine in size. We're still 6K, so that's not a problem. But you may find, if you get really close to the end of something, you may find that you're slightly over, but you can't find anywhere to tweak it out of, at which point there's another save type. So if we do save as, and then optimized SVG. Now I tend to name these Chocobo Opti, or I put Opti on the end of it so I can remember it's optimized. The reason being is I found that some of them, when you do them, the optimization kind of fudges some of the colors. Maybe that the colors just don't fit, it doesn't require them, and it looks a little bit ugly. So I always make sure I've got a raw copy I can go back to that I know works, and the optimized version, so I can try and tweak it and find out what goes where. When you save in an optimized format, it'll give you a load of options to how you want to do it. So shortening color values, converting CSS to XML. This is all background things. I tend to tick these top 4 options, leave the next 2, tick the bottom one. SVG output. You can. I tend to remove comments as well. That's not. I don't tend to put comments in, so it's not a major thing. Metadata. again, that contains license information, stuff like that. I can get rid of that as well. Some of these will save you a lot of space, some won't. Hit OK to save it. And then if we have a look, where is it? Chocobo Opti, 3.2K. So that was 6.3. That's 3.2. And if we open it up, Internet Explorer. 1 second while I drag this over to the scribe. That still looks pretty good. I don't see... There's a couple of issues with the lines here around the beak, but again, that's because I haven't finished sorting them out properly. So that's pretty much that. Oh, there is one last thing I'll say as well, is when you save these, you'll sometimes notice you have a massive white background around them. It's because the default thing in Inkscape is to give you this big A4 page. If you're ever working on a small logo and you don't want that, simply go File, Document Properties, Resize to Selection, and then save again. So Control S, go back to our image. It won't change the file size because it's a vector image. The file size is based on other things other than the size of the page, but it will look a lot nicer when you open it. Yeah, still opening it kind of on a full page version, but oh, sorry, it's the optimized one, wasn't it? Chocobo optimized I saved over. So there you go. It's now stuck it right in the corner. It's gone there. There's only one image on this page and it's tiny, so it sits up there. You'll also find then that when you upload the previews onto Gran Turismo, let's have a look, Gran Turismo. Or is it Decal Uploader? Yeah. As you can see, mine all sit in these nice little boxes, whereas I've seen some that are kind of like tiny little logos in one corner of the screen where the page hasn't been resized. Doesn't make any difference to using the actual logo because as far as the systems are, it's transparent. Just makes it a little bit easier to see in the preview. So yeah, I think that about covers everything. Best of luck making logos to you.